Oh shit.
Okay. I need to call somebody.
What? Okay, whatever. What's this? Erdman testified. That's right. This is the CIA whistleblower guy, right?
Fox News alert, Anthony Fauci's in big trouble. The little man in a lab coat got a lot wrong and never...
I don't know how he can be in big trouble. Didn't he get a pardon from Biden? For all crimes committed between, I think it was like 2014 and 2024. Like a blanket pardon?
fessed up to any of it. 2 weeks to slow the spread, wear a mask, and whatever you do, don't say lab leak. Well, today, a CIA...
That's right. So there was the lab leak theory that everyone said that was racist because if you're effectively xenophobic if you decide to say that maybe it came from the lab. It's possible that it came from the lab. The left was saying that it was xenophobia, racist, blah blah blah. They kept saying it. People on the right are like, no, it's not. It was from over there. And then, what do you know? It's from the fucking lab. And then they made this vaccine magically in 4 months, and they reported its efficacy, which is just a fancy term for relative risk reduction. Efficacy of the vaccine was 100%, and then it was 96%, then it was 94%. And I think people stopped paying attention after that because it was obviously false. And they reported on the relative risk reduction rather than the absolute risk reduction. In essence, if you have a 1% chance of developing symptomatic infection, and with the unvaccinated have a 1% chance of developing symptomatic infection, and you have a vaccinated person who develops symptomatic infection at 0.05%, that's a 95% efficacy of the vaccine. And that's the relative risk because it's relative to the control group or the unvaccinated, right? But if you take the absolute risk reduction and the rate of symptomatic infection is 1%, you're 99% of people are going to be asymptomatic or not develop any symptomatic infection, right? And so the absolute risk reduction going to 0.05%, you would have a 99.95% of not developing symptomatic infection. And so the absolute risk reduction is less than 1%, but the relative risk reduction is 95%. And so that's where they fucked everybody. And then they said that the vaccine is the only intervention that is available to anybody. You cannot take monoclonal antibodies. You cannot try ivermectin. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't go outside. You have to stay in your house. They maximized the health effects of people with symptomatic infection. They maximized it, right? And so 85% of all cases were in 85% of all, I think it was mortality, 85% was from the ages 51 and up. 85 plus people, the mortality rate in 85 plus was 45%. I believe I have that right. That might just be the overall infection rate. But yeah, they really fucked America with this. And people who think that Fauci dealt with this extraordinarily, if you have a disease and A works, B works, and C works, right? You don't stop B and C to improve the distribution of A. If you want a healthy population, you tell people, get outside, get sun, get vitamin D, because that's how your immune system works, right? That's the food for your immune system. And so Fauci is absolutely a fucking domestic terrorist, in my opinion. But let's see what they say.
A whistleblower told the Senate the deep state is still covering up where COVID came from, and Fauci helped them do it.
Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident. Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional.
But the cover-up didn't start in 2020. It started in 2015 when Fauci had his own scientists change the rules so he could keep funding gain-of-function research, the kind that was happening in Wuhan. Fast forward 4 years, October 2019, the CDC, Johnson & Johnson, and the former number 2 at the CIA teamed up with Bill Gates' foundation and the World Economic Forum to war game a fake coronavirus pandemic, just for fun.
This was a coronavirus pandemic tabletop exercise, curiously similar to the events that played out during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was attended by Dr. Fauci and individuals with IC ties like former DNI Avril Haines.
Here's what their pretend pandemic looked like. See if this jogs your memory.
CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill.
Weird coincidence, right? 2 months later, December 2019, China reports its first COVID case. Fauci immediately goes on TV and says it did not come from a lab.
Could you address these suggestions or concerns that this virus was somehow man-made, possibly came out of a laboratory in China?
The mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now is totally consistent with a jump of a species from an animal to a human.
What Fauci didn't mention, 2 months earlier, he'd already huddled up with the top virologist, and privately, they were all worried about a lab leak.
Dr. Fauci convened the now infamous February 1st, 2020 call.
I forgot a lot of this.
Some scientists on that call privately raised serious concerns about a laboratory origin. Yet, ironically, those same scientists later co-authored the proximal origin paper, which publicly dismissed the lab leak hypothesis. One author received a 9.
That's crazy, dude. I remember people saying that it's possible that it came from, but apparently you're xenophobic if you consider that it came from China, because your motivation for saying so is because you don't like Chinese people, not for the fact that you want the truth of the matter. And to say it came from, to seek truth and find out, hey, did this happen in China? Not to say that China is bad. Therefore, you were attacked, and this is where the morality police came out and started charging people in the court of public opinion and saying you're guilty because you're saying this, right? And the court of public opinion is often wrong, or what they're saying is invalid, and they're just going to call you a bad person. They still do it today, but less people are giving a fuck because everything they say has been so overplayed, Nazi, fascist, racist, blah, 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 xenophobic, whatever it is, has been so overplayed that people are just so sick and tired of talking about all of these fucking things that make you a morally good or morally bad person. And when on the left you believe in moral subjectivity, which is kind of moral relativity, how can you say that somebody else is good or bad when they don't agree with your sense of morality, right? If it's based on every individual person, every foundation of morality is based on an individual's beliefs and principles on the way that they describe good or bad, like good and evil. So they don't have a leg to stand on there. It's a way backwards, right? So it came from a lab. We know it came from a lab now, but there was severe pushback, which pushed back the truth. The people just wanted the truth, but they didn't want to be called racist because sometimes the juice is just not worth a fucking squeeze.
$1 million grant from Dr. Fauci's own agency after he changed his opinion from lab leak on the private phone call to natural origin in public.
Fast forward to August 2021, the CIA is 5 days away from calling it a lab leak. Then out of nowhere, the story changes.
As of August 12th, the CIA was considering calling this a lab leak, August 12th of 2021. And then that changed on August 17th of 2021. Right. And unfortunately, because the CIA would not provide us documentation that we asked for, we have no idea why that changed. It was significantly influenced by Anthony Fauci's injecting himself into the IC.
So Fauci cooked the intelligence to cover up how 1 million Americans died because he had his fingerprints all over that leaky lab. Then the Fauchmeister dropped the hammer on the truth tellers. Okay.
Following the CIA's COVID relook that culminated in 2023, the CIA retaliated against analysts supporting the lab leak hypothesis. CIA managers retaliated against them for their refusal to agree with management's middle-of-the-night anonymous rewrite of the analysis, which changed the assessment to a non-call judgment.
Now, remember when Fauci swore under oath that he never, ever, ever, ever funded gain-of-function?
That's right, but how can they do anything when he has a presidential pardon from 2014 to 2004? Right? The only thing that they can get him on is that he can no longer plead the fifth in front of Congress since he is essentially exonerated from all crime. So the only thing that they could really get him on maximum amount is fucking perjury. So I mean, like, what? There's no justice going to be served here. The same fucking thing with the Epstein files is going to happen with Fauci. People at the top are so well insulated that there is no sense of justice for the voters.
The NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research.
But they do, they did, they have, and they will.
Turns out he just changed the definition of gain-of-function and kept writing the checks.
Several of the BSEG scientists helped Dr. Fauci rewrite definitions of gain-of-function in 2015 to lift a funding pause on dangerous research.
So the very scientists that were commissioned to investigate COVID were, in some cases, the very scientists who were complicit in the origins of the gain-of-function experiments that may well have created COVID.
So the guy who may have funded the pandemic gets to run the investigation into the pandemic? You'd think the other party might want to ask some questions too, right? But Democrats couldn't find the room.
Senator Ruben Gallego, Democrat from Arizona, actually walked by us about 15 minutes ago. He saw the media cameras here, and we couldn't tell if he was joking or trolling or not, but he said, hey, what's going on here? And his staffer said, wow, I don't know, and they walked past us. So he's on that committee. He's not in the room.
Earlier this year, the CIA finally admitted it. COVID most likely came from the Wuhan lab. Only took them 5 years. But there's just one catch. The CIA says they have low confidence in their own answer. So they're pretty sure COVID came from a lab. They're just not sure. Rand Paul says the rest of the agencies are still slow-walking documents, while the same people who got it wrong are telling you to get over it. The good news, Fauci isn't out of the woods yet. AutoPen gave him a pardon, but state prosecutors can still go after him.
I didn't know that. I thought... So AutoPen, how if he's not liable for or charged criminally on the federal level, apparently you can still charge him on the state level?
And the feds are looking into whether to open a criminal case of their own, and they should.
But how can they open up a case? He's been pardoned.
1 million Americans are dead from a virus cooked up in a lab. And
it would be less if they allowed other monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, whatever, high-dose vitamin D. I don't know what it is. That would help the immune system or help dampen the virus. But this fucking guy is 100% culpable for all this shit, right? And it's interesting because there must obviously be a motive for his action to not indicate alternative intervention outside the vaccine. I don't know, man. This guy is a fucking snake, and there's something else behind the scenes. I think he's a patsy for somebody else. They needed him to do this thing. I don't know what his motive was, but he also fucking did this in the AIDS epidemic where he was prescribing medications that were killing people. Right, saying that it was the same, and it was the same thing he did with COVID. So this guy who is science, I'm science. He's not fucking science. I think he's a domestic terrorist.
Someone's got to answer for it.